Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Target Smart podcast. I'm Anthony Sanfilippo, joined as always by your trusty host, Albert Morales. Albert, good to have you back. I know you were out in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention, and we're going to do an entire episode today, kind of catching up with you about what it was like to be out at the convention. But before we do, I want to make sure that people know where they can find us. They can subscribe to the Target Smart podcast on any of your podcasting platforms, whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Pandora, Talk to Alexa, because it's on Amazon Music, YouTube as well, YouTube Music, if you just want to listen to it. You can also watch us on YouTube. Just make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, you hit that like button and subscribe so that you get an alert every time we put a new episode out. And you can always connect with us on X at Target Smart, on Facebook, Target Smart DC, and on LinkedIn. And if you want to email the podcast, please do at the Target Smart Podcast at targetsmart.com. So, Albert, welcome back, my friend. How was it? How was Chicago?
My kind of town, in the words of Sinatra. I finally, Anthony, after all these years, and anyone who knows me knows how much I enjoy a good steak. But I have to give a shout out to the good people at Chicago Steak or Chicago Cut Steakhouse. It was divine. It was a one day I splurged because you're on your feet all day from morning way into the early morning hours, but they really took care of us there. And wow, just great food. But convention, I mean, to be there is one thing. I don't know that television did it any justice. You hear that a lot when you see sporting events, whether it's the Masters or, name the venue, you have to kind of be there to enjoy it. But it really felt, to me anyway, similar to 2008 when then candidate Obama and Biden took the stage at the Broncos Stadium in Denver and just lit up the place. It was that kind of vibe. People were excited. You could feel it in the air. And it wasn't until this week when we started seeing, I think Gallup released one of their first polls for the presidential cycle showing the enthusiasm gap. And the enthusiasm level for Democrats or Kamala Harris voters is up there with 2008. Unfortunately for Trump Vance, they're not even at John McCain levels in terms of their enthusiasm. And this is, of course, coming on right after convention. But, there are so many data points now that you can look to, and I'm not even paying attention to polling anymore. But back to convention, the first night, it was electrifying. I like that they put President Biden up there on Monday to sort of open it up. I think he did a fine job at cementing his legacy, talking about all of his accomplishments from the infrastructure deal. We heard for 4 years, this is infrastructure week. This is infrastructure week from Trump. He could never get the ball across even the 50-yard line, let alone, to the across the finish line. And just to see him there in his element, sort of map out all of his accomplishments and passing the torch on to Vice President Harris was a beautiful moment. Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't easy for him, but he got it done, and it was. You saw it. Being there is yeah. Don't get me wrong.
I saw it. I hope enough of America saw it. It was so late, Albert.
It was so late, but get this, Anthony. If you looked at the ratings and Nielsen ratings, we still overperformed the RNC night after night after night after night. I think they understood after Monday that, hey, we went a little bit too long, and they realigned for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think who's that singer from South Carolina that got bumped? Very popular, sort of folksy guy.
James Taylor.
James Taylor. Yes. He was. He got bumped, and I think a couple of other members of Congress got bumped, but they lived, and so there was definitely a realignment Monday.
Yeah, well, I will say, just from watching on TV, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday seemed much more tight, much more ready to go. It was like I do some directing in theater, the Monday night to me seemed almost like a dress rehearsal performance where things are just like, oh, this is going on too long. Oh my God, we should have done this. We should have done that. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were like, boom, 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 like on point and really good. So that's how it seemed like to me on TV. But yeah, I mean, you were there in person. I guess it had to be really exciting. The cool thing for me was everybody with the Joe signs. We love Joe, and just seeing that go on for as long as it did. The embrace with his daughter on stage, all that stuff was really cool, and I think really hits home in America.
Yeah, but back to Target Smart's role there was really amplified. We had a strong team there. Our sales team was there, in addition to, of course, our fearless leader, Tom Bonnier, who was making his rounds with the media. But we had quite the presence there. I think anyone who was running a campaign of any sort got approached by someone within our team pushing the media buying platform and all of our other services. So it was a win-win for, from a business perspective on part of Target Smart, but also, it was a great night just for Democrats, a great week.
And I'll say this, Albert, as someone who's been, and I've been to a convention before, as a member of the media, which I want you to talk about your experience because you got to sit in with the media. You were kind of there you had a press credential as part of your time there. And so I want you to kind of share your firsthand experience with that. But I did the one here in Philly. And I remember it's just one giant party, right? And I mean, everybody knows what the purpose behind it is, right? And to generate the enthusiasm and the excitement for the election, and that's great. But it's a good time, right? It's a party atmosphere there from the big minute you get there till the minute you leave.
Yeah, you just brought back a memory from 2004. I was a 20-something-year-old staffer, staffing Governor Bill Richardson, who was the chairman of the convention at the time. And I'll never forget, one night he was up there with, I was trying to stay awake. He was, holding court with Governor Ed Rendell from Pennsylvania, a couple of other of his tight buddies that were there having their cigars and their libation of choice. This went on until 3 a.m., Anthony. And
Yeah.
I'm there with the trooper. The trooper is like, "You don't do this very often with him, do you?" I'm like, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, yeah, this is par for the course." I said, "Yes, well, I'm going to sleep in tomorrow morning." He said, "No, you're not. I don't know if you saw the latest schedule, but he's speaking at a 7 a.m. breakfast." Are you kidding me? And sure enough, got up and went over to his hotel, and he came out like as if nothing, as if he'd been in bed since 9 p.m. or something.
Work hard, party harder.
Yeah, I mean, but these are guys who did this day in, day out for a long time, and some of them are still doing so. Unfortunately, we lost Governor Richardson last year, and he was missed. I had a number of folks approach me, sharing their stories with him. But it is a big party. You can either make it into a party for yourself, or you could get things done. And we chose to just try to get under any camera or before any reporter that we could while we were there. You talk about the many venues that were there in terms of the press, everyone from CNN, NBC, Fox, international outlets. I had a number of reporters pull me aside speaking different languages just to see if I spoke their language, wanting an interview. I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't." But yeah, we went on. But it was great. You could never get every single person inside that venue. I think it holds 18,000. We put 20,000 people in there once you included the suites and the overflow and everything else. But there were still people that would have loved to have gotten in there, and it's a chance of a lifetime to be on that floor convention. Less than 0.00001% of Democrats ever get that privilege. Unless you're a delegate to the convention or the nominee or staff, it's very hard to get on that floor. So I was very blessed and fortunate to to be able to be there all 4 days. And from time to time, I would bring in someone to just to give them the treat, because all they need is your badge, and they get to walk in. One lady came back crying, giving me a big old hug. Oh, this was the greatest moment of my life. I'm like, lady, it's not.
Yeah.
It really isn't. But that's,
I know
when you get to do that kind of stuff for people, really, it's fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, and it's great that you kind of you get them that much closer to celebrity, right? I mean, that's really what they're kind of looking for. And the reason I brought up, Albert, the whole concept of it being one big party, and I don't want to act like there's not a similar party atmosphere at the RNC, but there is a difference between the two. At least this year there was. Sure, the people at the RNC had a good time, and they were doing probably the same thing as everybody else, having their beverage of choice and a cigar and getting a great meal. But the messaging is where I think the real difference was between these two events. One was based purely out of fear, and one was based purely out of joy. And I think that is where you're going to see probably a difference in resonating with the everyday American. You agree?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's the future versus the past. And if you believe that our best days are ahead of us, I think you're going to vote for Harris Walz. If you are just angry at the world and want to blame others for your lot in life, then you're probably going to go with Trump. But the beauty of it is that, at least judging by the data that's pouring in specific to fundraising, the jury's kind of in, and Kamala is winning that battle in a big way. This morning they announced that they're having a bus tour in Florida, of all places. I think for something like 40 or 50 stops along the way. I mean, talk about messing, getting inside Donald Trump's head, right? You're going into his home state, or his newly adopted state, however you want to categorize it. And they're going to be doing that because they've got the resources to do it. The money is coming into her coffers at rates that he can only dream. And so she's able to do these sorts of things. And, again, if you look at the polling data, there's still some people who aren't really familiar with her positions or aren't, completely sold on there. So her ceiling, you can argue, without being a professional pollster, that her ceiling is significantly higher than his is. I don't think his is anywhere close to 50%. He's probably 45, 47%. And that's a big problem for him. That's why he coveted that endorsement from the guy with the brainworm. And, that's why we didn't really need to even bother having that conversation.
I love the fact that you can say Trump, but you can't say Kennedy.
It's an insult to the family. We named our daughter, her middle name is Kennedy, and I'd be insulting my daughter too. So no, I will refrain.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. One thing that I know that you wanted to talk about a little bit, Albert, was the impact of the Latino vote this November. I know that we had on a previous episode, you had been discussing this and about how there are obviously a lot of Latino voters who are going to vote Harris Walz, but that there are still some that are still on the other side, and you feel like there's still work to be done there. Just how do you view it now as we're 2 months out, a little over 2 months out from the actual election? How do you view the Latino vote, and how do you think it's going to play out in November?
Well, poll after poll, Anthony, I'm glad you brought that up, because poll after poll post convention now is now showing a clear break from that. Seems like the Harris or the Biden-Harris ticket was stuck in a rut. We were somewhere around 50%. Since July 21st, however, you've had a series of polls come out now where you have a double-digit surge among support. More important, polls are one thing, but Tom Bonnier has been on television all week, as you know. So there are data points, there are surveys that we can point to where we see that double-digit increase in support level amongst Hispanic voters, even men. But then there are the voter registration data points that keep coming in. This morning, the latest one came out of Nevada. Now, a month ago, Anthony, we all know that Nevada was kind of out of reach. We were trying to figure out what that path was without Nevada and even Arizona, because Trump had such a strong and solid lead. But this morning, we finally got the report in. Hispanic women in particular, have been registering at a 300% since when compared to 2020. So there's been this huge surge. But that's not only specific to Nevada. These are other states that we've been monitoring across the country, and we're going to continue to study that as we get closer. But that is clearly a direct result of Harris ascending her censure to the actual nominee. And, we talk about enthusiasm all the time. That enthusiasm gap has all but been erased. It is closer now to 2008 levels versus 2020 or 2016. So that's worth celebrating, but we can't take our foot off the gas pedal, right? Latinos are no different than any swing voter. I always tell people that, you can't think of Hispanics as base voters. We just simply aren't. Base voters are limited to African American vote. That's Democratic base. They vote 90% Democrat year in, year out. Some in the enviro space, some of our more left of center voters as well. But Latinos, you have to show them, prove to them that you have their best interests at heart, that you're going to do something about strengthening public education, our infrastructure, job creation, and throw in a little bit of faith messaging from time to time, especially as you get into that Bible Belt of the South that runs through Arizona, New Mexico, even parts of Texas, and all the way down to Florida. We appreciate that type of language, but I feel a lot better about the Latino vote today than I did on July 20th. And I think there's room to grow. You look at candidates that are running that happen to be Latino. Ruben Gallego in Arizona, who's an incumbent congressman. He's chosen to leave Congress to run for Senate. He's now got like a 16-point advantage over Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake has not made herself any favors. She's a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but that's who she is. And I just don't understand, Anthony, when the message is going to get clear, is be made clear. When will the lesson be learned? There's that famous line from one of my favorite Churchill movies, Darkest Night. When will the lesson be learned? They keep nominating these fringe candidates. 2 years ago, it was Blake Masters running against Senator Mark Kelly. That guy was just way right of center in the ilk of J.D. Vance. And then they double down here 2 years later with Carrie Lake. Even, she's even more extreme than Masters was, if you can believe that. And that seems to be sort of the trajectory. This started really in 2017. We started winning in New Jersey and these off-year elections. And then we all know what happened in 2018. We ran the table on the House and Senate races. 2020, we did it again. We beat Trump. With the exception of New York, we did a pretty good job with our House races. That was candidate quality, and we didn't do a good job there. As a result, we lost the House. But my point is, we've been winning ever since Trump came into the picture, and no one at the RNC headquarters seems to understand that. Clearly, no one at Trump's orbit. But at the same time, they continue to double down with this anti-Latino rhetoric. Look at their convention. We've been talking about the conventions, but you look at the RNC convention. What sign did they have up? It was mass deportation. That was their battle cry. I mean, show me a Latino who is a first generation who is going to be saying, "Hey, that's for me." Well, guess what? Most of us have family that are here, that are there. They may be recent arrivals. maybe they're just non-residents or resident aliens without citizenship, but they deserve to be embraced and accepted like anyone else. So on the Latino vote, back to your original question, I'm feeling a lot better than I did on July 20th, and now there's actually empirical data that backs that up.
You talk about a lot of the data that has come in to show that the uptick in voter registrations. One of the things that you did out at the DNC is you had an opportunity to talk to one of the Harris Walls pollsters, Matt Barretto, and I'd like to play that interview that you did with him now, and then we can react to it after it's over. It's only 2 minutes long, but I'd like to add that here. So let's pull that up.
There's incredible enthusiasm, especially in the Latino community. She's from my state, California, biggest Latino state, no offense to Texas, but California, biggest Latino state in the country. Kamala Harris knows the Latino vote. We're now starting to see that in the data. It wasn't there a month ago. We did see a little bit of a slump. We're not seeing that anymore. We are coming back on the Latino numbers to that historic 2-to-1 trend.
So you mentioned Texas. So tell our audience from Texas what they need to know about Texas. I'm of the opinion that we're going to get really close because it seems like every presidential cycle we inch up about 3 points on average ever since Mitt Romney was running.
That's right.
I think it's going to be a very difficult proposition come 2028 when we are out there re-electing President Harris. What's going to be the play?
I think, listen, I'll say this right now. We can revisit this in 28. I think in 28, Texas will be a battleground state. I was saying that about Arizona after.
Well, not sure why that stopped playing there for a second. Not sure why that stopped playing there, Albert. But let's let you finish it up. What he was about to say there. What did he tell you about the Texas?
So there's this Texas California struggle that Matt and I have always had. He's from California, I'm from Texas, and I always preach that Texas is way better than California. So that's the debate. But my question to Matt was, do you think that Texas come 2028 will be a real battleground state? And he was making the case that it will be because it's on the same trajectory that Arizona was a few cycles ago. We were inching we were just climbing that mountain slowly, and then we got to the top, and the rest is history. We won it now. We hold one of the Senate seats, or both of them actually. I think one of the incumbent senators switched over to independent party, but I think she still caucuses with Democrats. But in Texas, the challenge there, Anthony, is that you've got like 6 media markets. You've got El Paso, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, South Texas, Amarillo, and any other medium-sized media markets. So it's a very expensive proposition. You got to go in there with like $100 million if you're going to do that. But once you make that competitive, think of the Republican Party or whoever their nominee will be going up against President Harris, who I hope will be President Harris by then. They really are going to be in a pickle because it would be the equivalent of us having to defend California or New York. Once Texas is off the map for them, talk about being in the political wilderness for perhaps generations if they don't get their act together. But it doesn't seem like they have any willingness to even think about remotely moderating their tone towards the human race. They're just that negative. So that's and who knows what's going to happen in November, right, Anthony? I'm of the mind that we talk about abortion rights a lot on this program because we all have women in our lives that are feeling threatened by that issue. But today, and you saw this at convention, 1 in 3 women in this country have been relegated to second-class citizenship because they can no longer get access to an abortion, regardless of whether or not that woman's life is at stake. I happen to know women in my in my space, family and friends that have had to make that tough decision. And it was a life or death decision. Luckily, they had the resources to get out and have that procedure done. But for so many, it is not an option. And think of that minor. We all hear, we were all familiar with that story of the young girl in Kentucky that was so present in Governor Beshear's reelection campaign. They got him over the hump. I mean, he won on that issue, Anthony, by in unbelievable margins, like double-digit margins on that issue in red Kentucky. So I don't think that we should automatically write off Texas even for November, given how potent that issue is. And we even had, one of the speakers that had to go through that awful experience, speak at convention. I think you probably saw her. I think it was Thursday night. So, but getting back to Matt's point, I think the long-term game for us politically, once you include Texas in that mix, the future looks really bright for Democrats. If you're a Republican right now, and you're going to have a very long walk in the wilderness should you lose come November, because it only gets harder come 2028. Because once you're having to compete in Texas, it's different, and then you got redistricting come up. We have to take back the legislature in Texas in order to have, and the governorship in order to have fair lines drawn out, because it's a process that is unlike some states where you have independent redistricting commissions. Texas is one of those states where the legislature draws up the maps. Hence, you have these gerrymandered, not only state house districts, but congressional districts. And that's why we are in the position that we are. It's a Democratic state. If you really think about it, you look at Houston, you look at all the major urban areas, they vote overwhelmingly Democratic, but statewide is a different story. And what's going on in rural Texas right now with the issue of vouchers that the governor is trying to shove down their throats is only dividing them even more. So I'd rather be us than them. I say that a lot, but I really mean it as it relates to Texas.
Well, speaking about a lot of rather be us, you have a ton of photos that you took at the DNC, and I put together a little slideshow of you hobnobbing with the elite, right? No, I want to pull this up on the screen. Sorry if you're going to see my full screen for just a second before I pop this in there. Let's go full screen here. There we go. Is that full screen now, Albert? You see that?
Yes.
That's
Albert
you and
Caitlin Collins.
Yes, you and Caitlin Collins, CNN anchor. Did you just run into her on the floor? How did this photo come to be?
Yeah, she was there on the floor. I was walking the floor, making my rounds, talking to reporters that I knew from my work. And she couldn't have been any nicer. She said hi, and I said hi. I said, "Hey, do you do selfies?" She said, "Of course I do." And I told her, every night, my wife and I, you are the one program that we do not miss. And she just tickled pink. She's from Alabama. My wife's from Alabama. And you say I was hobnobbing. I was thinking last night, if I was shoveling horse manure, we live on a farm and I'm having to clean out the stables. I'm thinking, man, a week ago, I was just living it up, and look at what I'm doing now.
That's great. That's great.
No, but she couldn't have been any nicer.
That's awesome. Here's Olivia Giuliana, who was one of the convention speakers. Yeah, go ahead. Tell us, Albert.
No, she's just a breath of fresh air. She's one of these influencers now. Anthony, I was admitted to the DNC as an influencer because of our podcast. And we were one of 200. We were the only, I think, company that had that access to said group. And she was one of the many talented young people who were, I'm convinced, her generation, they're going to change the world. Everyone talks about how gun violence is going to be with us forever. No, it's not. People like Olivia and her generation, they're going to amend the Constitution, and we're going to get rid of these problems that have been plaguing us for for decades now. She was just a breath of fresh air. She's more in the reproductive freedom movement, but she tackles a lot, especially gun violence, because she happens to be from Texas, and she was just a delight. We're gonna hopefully have her on the podcast here soon too, so she can educate us on what's going on in Texas.
That's fantastic. John Russell, West Virginia, also a convention speaker.
Yeah, he was not expected to speak, and I talked to him about that after he spoke, and he was just, he was very happy. He was very excited. He is a self-described, blue collar son of West Virginia, very much into the labor movement. He's very educated on the history of the labor movement. He spoke to that, if you recall, listening to him. He was only given 2 minutes, much like these other speakers were, but he took advantage of those 2 minutes, and he really made a difference. And I think John Russell is someone to look for. He's a journalist, but he's also, I think he's got a political future. I really see him as perhaps as a senator one day, representing Appalachia. So he's a really good guy, and he also expressed interest in continuing with our dialogue. So hopefully we can get on the podcast before the election.
That's great. That's great. This is just you on the floor of the DNC. Ho hum. Just Albert on the floor. No big deal.
No, I'm actually on the platform of the creators, and there was this big rift. Yeah, there was this rift with the media, right? Because they're not given a platform like the creators were. They just have their press badges, and they're able to wander about and visit with the various delegations that were there. But every day I was there reporting at 2:00 with hopes of getting my 15 minutes on the stage. And finally it came on the day of Vice President Harris's speech, our nominee. So I was able to get my 15 minutes there, and I interviewed some other folks. Hopefully we'll be able to share at some point. But it was quite the view.
Now here you are with Ed O'Keefe from CBS.
Yeah, Ed is one of those, another young reporter who's, a lot of people remember him from the Washington Post. He was on the beat covering the White House. Now he's like the national political correspondent for CBS News. He's on the evening news. He's on the weekend program on Face the Nation. He does it all. And few reporters work as hard. But, it's a classic case of that's someone who loves the job. And I think whether it's him, whether it's Caitlin Collins, any of these, tier one reporters, they're good because they love what they do. And they put the time, and they do their homework, and they ask the tough questions. And Ed just happens to be one of the better reporters who doesn't pick sides. He asks those tough questions from both sides of the aisle, and that's why he is where he is today.
This is a special one.
Yeah. So there.
How did this happen, Albert?
Well, it was a chance encounter. He was. I was sitting down at my table there behind him, and I saw him walk in. And I'm of the old school, Anthony. I don't have a whole lot of pictures with politicians. I have one like with Governor Richardson, my old boss, back when I was really young, and another one with Ed Rendell. I mentioned him earlier, former governor of Pennsylvania. But I was brought up in the political school that it's never about you. If there is a principal around and there's a volunteer or someone that would benefit from that, you could make their day by getting them the picture. You pull them in there, take the picture, and you move on. But Bill Daley's one of those. He's legendary, right? He's former. He has more of a finance background, but he also was a chief of staff to President Obama, and son of the late Mayor Daley. I mean, talk about a political pedigree there that is way up there. And I approached him. I said, "Listen, I'm not one to bother politicians for photos, but
yep.
You could do me this favor. You're one of the few that I would I would probably frame it in my office. And he said, sure. And then his son came across and said, hey, Daddy. And I said, here, I'll take the picture. And he took it, and off I went. And he couldn't have been any nicer. Really, really good guy.
That's a great one. Bill Daley, former White House chief of staff. That's great. Here's another one, another big name. You and former DNC chairman Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah, my old boss. He recognized me and said, "Hey, Albert," and we hung out a little bit. Funny enough, you probably saw the stories of how difficult it was to get into the convention because of all the security perimeters and Secret Service and the protesters. So they had to stop and then let people in, stop, let people in. And on Monday, I turned to my right, and there's former Chairman Terry McAuliffe, former governor of Virginia. I'm like, what are you doing stuck in line? Of all the people. And then next to him was the finance chairman for the campaign, also like waiting like the rest of us schmucks. And after a few minutes, Secret Service came in and escorted them in. But it was quite the experience. I'm like, hey, Mr. Chairman, you mind taking me in? I'll be Albert McAuliffe. He's like, yeah, I don't think they'll buy it, Albert. So we had a good laugh, and
that's great.
Well,
you go from the former DNC chairman to the current DNC chairman. You and Jamie Harrison.
Jamie, Jamie is one of those. You spend enough time in this town, and you quickly realize it. When it comes to friends, you probably can count them on one hand and have a finger or two left over. But Jamie has been there. When he was on the Hill, we were friends, and we've just been really tight over the years. And he's the reason why I was able to, frankly, have the access that I did at convention. One day I just got a letter saying, "Hey, Chairman requests your visit, your presence at the convention, and this is what you're going to do." And whoa, okay, I'll take that deal. But Jamie, talk about pulling off one of the best conventions, and if not the best convention in modern history, between him and Mignon Moore, the chair of the convention. They really did it right. I mean, it was nothing is perfect. No event ever is. But Jamie, to see him ascend to where he is today, and if you know anything about his background, you know that he did not grow up under the best circumstances. He was raised by his grandparents, and but he worked hard, studied hard, and as a result, he now is where he is, and it's a great American story. Success. Love the guy. And I don't know that he has any detractors. That's hard to say about, this town or anyone in this town.
For sure. Here's you and CNN contributor Jamal Simmons. Looks like you guys are like chilling in some lounge at this point.
Yeah, that was actually the DNC's, one of their skyboxes, and that was after the event. And I was getting ready to go, and he walks in and said, "Hey, let's catch up." And we caught up a little bit. He's another former colleague from my DNC days. He has a communications background, but also, very, very astute. One of the better political operatives that we have as a party. If tomorrow the presidential campaign needed a new comms person, or dare I say a campaign manager, Jamal is one of the few that can just assume that role. He's that good, very well liked, very well respected, son of Michigan, really good friend too. And it was just nice to be able to catch up with him. And he's got a family now, 2 kids, so he's not on the beat all the time. His schedule is more agreeable, but it was fun to catch up with him and snap that photo.
That's cool. This is a fun one, Albert.
Yes, Lalo Alcaraz. He is a famed cartoonist from the West Coast. He does a lot of political cartoons, very active on the social media. I knew him a little bit, but not that well, and I was able to get him some press access as a creator of some sort a couple of days, and he couldn't have been any nicer either. He's very happy. Gifted me that cartoon of the legendary Dolores Huerta, who used to work with Cesar Chavez back in the days of the farm worker movement. who was still, by the way, I saw her at a party like at 3 a.m. like nothing. I'm like, good grief. I hope when I'm like 90, whatever, 2 years old that you are, I can hang as well. But he's very nice. He does great work. Just good person all around.
That's great. This is a special one, huh?
Julie, yes. Julie is very hard to catch up with these days. So when I saw her, I ran and gave her a big old bear hug. She's the vice president's campaign manager, so she's very busy. She happened to be there. I think she was looking for her dad or a family member that was kind of lost, and she was trying to navigate that. But I caught her. We chatted a little bit, and I said, "Let's take a quick photo." She said, "Sure, let's do it." She said, "Oh, here." So we took it, and off she went, and it was a chance encounter, but probably won't talk to her again until after the election.
Yep, and that for those that are just listening on the podcast feed, not actually watching on YouTube, that's Julie Chavez Rodriguez, the campaign manager for the Harris Walz campaign. So, next one. Now, this one, Albert. This one, I think everybody's going to be booing that's watching on YouTube. But talk to us about how you ended up doing a photo with Kelly Ann Conway. What?
Well, let's just say it was a case of mistaken identity. And, you're on that's that floor where all of the skyboxes with the various networks were CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, you name it, they were all there. So, I ran into President Clinton. And he said, "How about a selfie? Let's take a selfie." We took it, and off she went, off I went. But I got some chuckles out of that one because I posted it on my social media account. Like, what? Kelly Ann Conway? Like, she's a human, she's just there.
Yeah, she thought you were somebody else, right?
I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. That's all right. It's all good. It's great. It's good. It's funny. And this last one, Albert. What the heck is going on here? You're outside holding a Coach Walz sign, and you're like in the face of a protester. And I'm like, oh no, like what is that? I can see some security in the background, those police officers back over there. They're kind of looking over like, we got to get some activity happening outside the United Center. What's Albert doing?
Well, there was no shortage of protesters at our convention, as you know, Anthony, from Name the Issue. But there was one cohort, one group of, these are people I grew up around. They're whether you want to call them Bible thumpers or, these far right, self-proclaimed evangelicals. And some of them were spewing their typical anti-gay, anti-Muslim, whatever rhetoric. And I just wasn't having it because I happened to be with some friends that were of that description. And so I went up there. I said, "Brother, listen, I get it. I was brought up in a Southern Baptist home myself. I see where you're coming from. But allow me to ask you this. Have you brought any souls to Christ while you've been here? Because all I hear from you is retribution and condemnation. And, there is a reason why less than 50% of this country is now attending church on a regular basis because of the likes of you. That is not a welcoming message." And I said, I read scripture. I've read it. I've been a loyal attendee of church, even more recently. But nowhere in the Bible do I see an example of Jesus doing what you're doing. We had this prolonged debate. Finally, he ran out of memorized scripture, so we called it a day. And I went on my way. I went about my way. A friend happened to be walking by, Hector Sanchez. He's a president of Mi Familia Vota, which is one of the largest Latino activist organizations, advocacy organizations that's out there doing the good work in a number of states. He took the picture and he said, "Don't be so angry." So I explained it to him. I posted it with his permission, and people reacted to that in kind.
That's great. Well, it seems like, Albert, you had one heck of an experience out at the DNC. Cayman only comes up every 4 years, right? You can have one of those every year, right? It'd be kind of a fun little get together.
Yeah, it's kind of like the World Cup, I guess, or the Olympics.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's only every 4 years. It's a heavy lift. Will Rogers, one of the legendary Will Rogers, good Democrat, had a saying. He says, I am not a member of an organized political party. I am a Democrat." So imagine having organized us Democrats every year and make it look like it did on television every year. I don't think it's possible. It takes time.
That's great. That's great. Well, Albert, this has been it's been a fun episode. It's been a good one. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of good stuff. Some more stuff coming up ahead, obviously, as we head into Labor Day weekend here. Everyone always says that the country doesn't pay attention until after Labor Day. So guess what? Everybody's going to be starting to pay attention when we get back to work on Tuesday. So I anticipate every episode from here through the election will be very, very specific and oriented toward all of the progressive causes, and we'll dive into them with some great guests. And you have the contacts, my friend. You are the man, as far as that's concerned. And I urge people to keep coming back to the Target Smart podcast every week from now through the election and beyond. And they could do that very easily, Albert, by subscribing to the podcast on all those platforms: Apple Podcasts,
Yes.
Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, or watch us live, or not live, but maybe we'll someday live, but watch us on YouTube, where you can also subscribe and hit the like button and get notified whenever we put a new episode out. And if you want to contact us here at the show, please email us at thetargetsmartpodcast@targetsmart.com. Any final thoughts, Albert, before we wrap this up and head off to our Labor Day weekends?
I just hope folks have a fun and safe Labor Day with these Joe Biden gasoline prices, Anthony, that are like $3 on average.
Coming down, man. Coming down.
I think it's going to be the most heavily trafficked Labor Day weekend that we've had in recent memory. So that's good. Just be careful out there and have an extra burger. Because you're going to need that protein to walk and canvass on behalf of our nominee from here to Election Day. So we'll see you next week.
Awesome. So for Albert Morales, I'm Anthony Sanfilippo. Say thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week here on the Target Smart Podcast.